How much of an impact will this latest trade dispute have on the Canada-U.S. relationship? Well, Kirsten Hillman should know. She is Canada's ambassador to the United States, and she joins us from Washington. Ambassador, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, David.
So the Trump administration signed CUSMA, but the Biden administration is living it, and it's interpreting the auto parts provision in a different way than I think we expected. So what does it say to you about the Biden administration's approach to this deal?
So I think the first thing to point out is that, as you said, this rule is about how we interpret particular products and whether they're eligible for the CUSMA tariff relief. And the interpretation that Canada and Mexico have is different than the interpretation that the U.S. is putting forward. But that has been true since the entry into force of the agreement. So it was true under the Trump administration, and the Biden administration is maintaining the same interpretation. We're confident that our interpretation is correct. We've been trying for about a year and a half to work this through at the technical level. We were unable to get there, so we're taking the next step, which is to have an independent dispute settlement body adjudicate the matter for us.
Why do you think, though, there is such a broad disagreement so fresh out of the gate with this agreement, right? Starting with President Trump and now President Biden, that, you kind of think this understanding would have been sorted out in the negotiations.
Yeah, well, of course you hope that you leave the negotiating table and you all have the same understanding of the rules that you put on the page. The truth is that that's not always the case. And that isn't the case here. We're quite confident in our interpretation. We really do think that the words on the page reflect exactly what we believe is the right outcome. The U.S. has a different view. This does happen from time to time, and we'll work through them. That's exactly why we have these independent decision-making bodies to have a look at it and decide for us.
What's the reaction in Washington to Canada and Mexico taking this step?
Well, I think within the administration, there was no surprise because, as I say, we've been trying to work at this for about a year and a half. We've talked to the administration. We've talked to stakeholders. We've been working really hard across all sorts of different channels to try and come to a mutual understanding. So I suspect that there is no great surprise here, that we're taking it to the next phase. And hopefully, we'll be able to get through this fairly quickly and put it behind us and move on.
This comes after the concern over the electric vehicle credit, in the Build Back Better legislation, which I know has run into internal problems. But how worried should Canadians be about the relationship with the Biden administration on important economic issues, given the dispute over electric vehicle credits and now the fact that this couldn't be resolved through sort of conversation and negotiation, has had to go to a formal dispute process?
Yeah. Well, first on the electric vehicle taxes, I think I would say that we have had a lot of discussions with the administration and with Capitol Hill where that proposal sits. I think that, we will continue to monitor the situation. I think people are hearing very clearly how important that is to Canada, and I do believe we will find a way through it. As to the Canada-U.S. trading relationship, I'd really like to point out that in November, which is the last month for which we have full statistics, Canadian exports to the United States were up almost 6.5%. Canadian imports were up almost 5% from the United States. Both of those figures represent all-time highs in Canada-U.S. trade, import and export. So, in a relationship of this magnitude, with the over $2 billion a day in trade that we have with the Americans, there will be disagreements. And when we have those disagreements, they will be important to us because the magnitude of the trade is so important to us. But that being said, the fact that the trade is so important to us is also the key to finding solutions, because it's in their interest to find a solution to these challenges. It's in our interest to find a solution to these challenges and to continue to support each other. So, Canada-U.S. trade, very strong as it's been in a very, very long time, despite the fact that we're in the middle of, we continue sadly to be in the middle of a COVID pandemic and have supply chain challenges and others.
There is some analysis that this move could end up hurting the United States if the U.S. interpretation stands. You heard from Flavio Volpe, the head of the automotive parts manufacturers here in Canada. So given the potential downside, or at least the analysis of a potential downside, why do you think the U.S. is doing this?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't really speak for the U.S. I think that the points that Flavio Volpe has made are very good ones, and I know that he's made them down here in Washington, as have we. Hopefully that those are in the U.S. calculation. I can't speak to why they're taking the interpretation they are. I really can't. But firmly believe it's incorrect. And it's not good for U.S.-Canada-Mexico integration in our sector. And so we're going to make those arguments forcefully. And I think we have a very strong case.
Have you heard from the U.S. auto industry? I mean, obviously, Canada and Mexico has made it clear, but has the U.S. auto industry signaled to you or other government officials how they feel about this particular interpretation? If they're, are they leaning on the Biden administration to make this the stance?
Yeah, I don't know about their private conversations with the Biden administration, and it's a diverse industry down here. So my suspicion is that different players within the industry might come to the table with different perspectives.
Okay, and so I want to go back for one last point, go back to the electric vehicle credit. I know you say you're working on that in Congress. The Build Back Better deal is on life support, if not done. I mean, where do things stand right now in your conversations with congressional leaders on this in trying to have that, if it does get resurrected, it comes back in a form that is not so difficult for Canada to accept?
Right. So what we are doing, both on the Hill extensively and also, within the administration, although, as you point out, this matter is really firmly in Congress at this point, is making sure that everybody who has influence over and a voice on the issue of the EV tax credit understands really three things, right? The EV tax credit is a violation of the CUSMA. The EV tax credit, if they implement it in a way that discriminates against Canada, will cost jobs in the U.S. and will be very significant for our integrated auto sector in a negative way. And third, it's inconsistent with our very strong mutual efforts to combat climate change and electrify our transportation sector. So there's lots of reasons why it makes no sense. I think that those arguments were being heard very well before December, when, as you say, the act found itself in. I don't know if I would say life support. As a diplomat, those are hard things for someone like me to say, but you said it, so I will quote you. It finds itself in a very difficult place, and I think it's clear that it won't go forward in the form that it was in before December if it does move forward. But our job here is to never let up. And until we are quite sure that there is not going to be a proposal that will be detrimental to Canada, the Canadian auto sector, and Canadian workers, we won't stop making sure everybody understands our perspective on this.
Well, if they threaten to revoke your diplomatic papers, you can blame me for that phrasing. I don't want to get you in trouble for that. But just one final question. I mean, how likely do you think they are to bring that particular measure back? Because, there has been struggle domestically to advance this agenda in whole and in part for the Biden administration. I mean, how worried are you at this point that we could see that tax credit come back?
I think it's very difficult to say. Since they've come back from the Christmas break here in Washington, all the focus has been on voting rights legislation. The next thing on their agenda is going to be funding of the government. So really, the BBBA Act has moved off of the front burner, and therefore getting a sense of if and how it may come back at this point, it's just too early to tell.
Okay. Ambassador Hillman, thank you so much for your time.
Nice to talk to you. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.